Hello and welcome to South South News. I'm Connor Schratz. Our guest today is Joe Beasley, the president and founder of the Joe Beasley Foundation, an organization based out of Atlanta that focuses on improving the lives of colored people around the world. Mr. Beasley also serves as the Southern Regional Director of the Rainbow Push Coalition and the Human Services Director of Antioch Baptist Church North. Mr. Beasley, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here, Connor.
I wanted to ask if you could give us an overview of what your organization, the Joe Beasley Foundation, does.
The Joe Beasley Foundation really grew out of ideas of persons like Latron Price, who heads up the foundation as the president. Actually, I put together a few years earlier an organization I called African Ascension. African Ascension has as a position that Africans across the world will arise together, ascend together. And from that, some discussion came along that, well, you're 74 years old now, and given the demographics and what is promised, you know, maybe you're in your last stage of, I'm planning on breaking 100. But nonetheless, the Joe Beasley Foundation was really not my idea. It was the idea of others, but of course, I acquiesced because I thought if some of the work that we've tried to do could continue, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Well, that's very interesting. And so I was wondering, you said it wasn't your idea, it was the idea of others. I was wondering if you could tell me how you got involved, one, in the work that got you into this foundation in the first place, and two, how the origins of the foundation came together.
It might be useful to go back a little further than that about my background. Growing up, really one step above slavery. As you probably know, Africans spent about 240 years as property in the United States. And after the 240 years, the emancipation period came along, had about 10 years where Africans had mobility in the United States. But then there was a southern deal cut between the North and the South, and the decision was made to pull the troops out of the South. And of course, we had then 100 years of reign of real terrorism, but in the form of the Ku Klux Klan. I grew up through that era. And then, of course, the civil rights movement began in the early 50s with Martin Luther King. Some of the issues that evolved around Montgomery, Alabama, and with Rosa Parks refusing to give us a seat on the bus, and Martin Luther King being there in town, resonated with the people by saying, better that we would walk in dignity to ride in shame. And so we were able to break the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. And that led on to other things like the public accommodations, because, you know, there was a time not too long ago in this country where we couldn't visit restaurants or go to hotels in the southern United States. And so a lot of this, and then I'm a retired military person. I spent 21 years in the United States Air Force, traveling across the world, in Vietnam, et cetera. And then after I retired, I'd made a conscious decision that I was going to be involved in the civil rights struggle. And then, of course, I joined up with Operation Push with Jesse Jackson. Now, what the notion of African Ascension was, because I'd traveled, again, over the world, first as a military person, then secondly, as a member of a civil rights organization. And what I couldn't help but to observe is that African people, whether they're here in the United States, whether they're in Brazil or in Colombia or on the continent of Africa, was really on the margins of society. And I, just in my own surmising, felt that Africans will ascend or rise together. Now, what I've observed and know is that it's not only African people that are marginalized and are suffering, but there are other people. So I believe that people that's on the margins, like in the South, the people that you focus on in the emerging world, must come together. Because in the 21st century and beyond, there should be no such thing as hunger. There's plenty of food, there's plenty to go around. It's just a matter of greed, and we have to somehow address this equity. And I believe unless we're able to address equity, then what we see going in Tunisia, what we see going on in Egypt, what happened in Egypt, and now in Libya and in other parts of Africa, it's just a matter that the have-nots are locked out. It's just they're going to assume their personhood, and of course we're living in this age of information with the BlackBerries, and just got back from Africa, and the young people are just flooding the cyber cafes. And so it used to be where you could kind of throw a rock in the world and hide your hands. You can't do that anymore. So we must move now to equity globally, not just North, but all the people of the world must be recognized as full citizens, as due all the respect that a human being are entitled to.
So it sounds like your organization focuses on this concept of solidarity among both Africans within Africa and the diaspora. So going along with that, could you tell us about some of the work that you've been doing in some of these developing countries that you mentioned?
Well, let me give you an example. In my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, one of the largest multinational corporations in the world that's got a logo that's immediately identifiable throughout, and that's the Coca-Cola Company. In Brazil, 57% of all the Coca-Cola that is consumed in Brazil is consumed by African descendants, but they can't get a real job at Coca-Cola. And that's not equitable. I just returned from Africa, and throughout Africa, the Coca-Cola company is selling. Matter of fact, Africa is a new frontier. I mean, it's a growth for a company like Coca-Cola. And so, but nonetheless, the ownership of the bottling companies in Africa is still, for the most part, controlled by white South Africans. And so we're saying to Coca-Cola, the model that you have in the world, whether it's in Brazil or whether it's on the continent of Africa, is not going to survive the 21st century. And of course, we've illustrated that here in the United States, because I guess in the early 80s, when African Americans had acquired some money, like basketball players, professional athletes, had money, and we approached Coca-Cola and said we want to purchase a bottling company. And of course, the Coca-Cola's refrain was, well, we don't sell bottling companies to black people. And so we suggested that we had the capacity to change our taste and beverages. So it was a threat of a boycott. And of course, Coca-Cola came around. And another example of that, when we got involved in South Africa to end the apartheid system in South Africa, where we had 5 million white South Africans lording over 30 million black Africans. And of course, I agree with Martin Luther King that it really is not about the color of your skin, but really it's the content of your character. And so I've learned, and working in the civil rights movement in the United States, some of our best friends and allies have been white people. So we certainly can't just say it's a black-white thing. That's not so, because we had too many people that died with us to secure our rights. And so I believe that much of the dynamics that came out of the African American civil rights movement here in the United States is replicatable throughout the world. And as you probably know, nonviolent direct action is a suitable remedy even for the class system that we see. Even they're singing in Tiananmen Square, "We shall overcome." And so I believe that the techniques that was used by Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement in the United States need to be globalized. And perhaps you to take on some of these multinational corporations to say that if we're going to give you our patronage, we want reciprocity. That's just a common sense principle. If I can help you, I expect you to help me.
You say that, like Martin Luther King, you believe that whites and blacks can be very much on the same page with these goals. So I was wondering if you could tell us how you think that people in wealthy countries, specifically even the United States, both white and black, could learn from the example of your foundation and take action to achieve these ends on their own.
Well, and I think what you just finished saying, on their own, which means voluntarily, that it's in my own enlightened self-interest that I would do the right thing. Otherwise, people are going to rise up, because we live again, as this wonderful station is doing, it's age of information, and information is power. And all of the people of the world is going to be empowered with information. And so therefore the people that in the United States, sadly, you know, when General Motors used to be the largest employer in the United States, and they paid a good livable wage. They were unionized. Now we have the Walmart company, which is not unionized, and it's global. Matter of fact, it just moved into South Africa, and then it's moving on up through Zambia and Zimbabwe, and so, but they're anti-union people, and I think that's one thing that's pretty rough about Walmart, and we've tried to say, we want to help you. We want to help you survive in the 21st century, but you're going to have to pay a livable wage. Now, with respect to Walmart, as you know, they just almost just dodged the bullet here. This court, yeah, because, you know, that would have been billions of dollars had it been certified as a class action suit. But I guess this is one of the things why we're so vigilant about this upcoming election, because right now we got a Supreme Court of the United States that's, you know, divided 5-4. That's kind of right-leaning, and so had we had a more progressive court, it certainly would have went the other way with Walmart. So I guess all our actions are tied together. One action bring on another reaction, and so in the African Ascension Joe Beasley Foundation, we say we want a democracy, and we're pushing the notion of a democracy globally. The United States is pushing it, and nonetheless, we want our democracy here in the United States to work for people. For example, here in New York City, our premier city in the United States, when Giuliano was the mayor of this city, he was a brutish man, a real brutish man. Now, and people say, well, now we can come to New York City and we can enjoy Times Square. But I would suggest that the most important entity in any city, anywhere in the world, are the people. And when you treat the people as if they were rubbish, that's going to eventually come back to haunt you. And so I guess Giuliano did a great job when some of our, we call them terrorists, and that's one man terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, of course. But when those Twin Towers went down, yeah, we were able to get bin Laden. Yeah, and then everybody's still applauding themselves, and but nonetheless, we must do justice, because if someone is angry enough at you or at me, that they will come into your country and will train for 2 years how to fly a plane and then fly to your tallest buildings, kill themselves along with other people, that's a dangerous situation. And we've not resolved it. And so what I would suggest is that might does not make right. And so I think we need to be doing the right thing. And so the people in South, like I'm in Haiti a lot, and in Cuba, and Brazil, of course, and Colombia, we have a lot of people that are suffering, and other people are doing extremely well. That is, everybody needs to do well, and if we're able to do well, then I believe that we'll have a peaceful world.
I have one final question for you. It's a bit abstract, but I wanted to know what you want people to think of when they hear the words, the Joe Beasley Foundation.
Well, I would hope they would think about justice, equality, and that we live in a world of plenty, which means that there should be plenty of food. And if you're a human being, you're entitled to some basic fundamental things. If you're hungry and eat nutritious food, you need to have decent housing, decent shelter. If you're sick, you should be able to go see a doctor. Those are fundamental things that we have to come to grips with. So if you think about the Joe Beasley Foundation, think about Joe Beasley, whether it's 10 years from now or 100 years from now, we're talking about equity. The most important thing is human beings, wherever they are in the world. We're precious, and we need we're going to demand that we be treated fairly. Otherwise, the world is not going to be fit for nobody to live in.
All right, that's something to strive for. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. For South South News, I'm Connor Schratz, and thanks for tuning in.